Bundaberg, Queensland. A small coastal city, known for its beaches, sugarcane fields, and peaceful community life. But in May 2025, this quiet place would be shaken forever. At the center of it all was a 17-year-old girl named Pheobe Bishop. Phoebe wasn't just another teenager. She was described as funny, outgoing, and deeply caring. Friends said she had dreams of working in childcare, maybe even traveling the world. To her parents, she was the light of their lives. But behind that bright smile lay a troubled home life. Phoebe had been living away from her parents, staying in a house with friends. Friends who, at first, seemed like her safe space. But soon, they would become the very people at the center of a horrifying mystery. It was late May 2025 when Phoebe was last seen. She had been hanging around the house she shared with her roommates. But then, she suddenly vanished. Her phone went silent, messages went unanswered, and by the next morning, her parents knew something was terribly wrong. Phoebe's disappearance was immediately suspicious. She wasn't the type to run away without telling anyone. She wasn't the type to go off the grid. Something had happened. Within hours, the family reported her missing, and police launched their first inquiries. But the biggest question was, who had seen Phoebe last, and what really happened inside that house? Bundaberg is the kind of place where everyone knows everyone. So when news broke that 17-year-old Phoebe Bishop had vanished, the entire community rallied to find her. Posters went up, social media exploded, volunteers joined the search. Neighbors scoured the bushland. Her family made desperate public pleas. "Please, if anyone knows anything, come forward. Our daughter just wants to come home." But as days went by with no answers, hope began to fade, and whispers began to spread. Whispers that maybe the people closest to Phoebe weren't telling the whole truth. The house where Phoebe lived with her so-called friends was messy, chaotic, and filled with tension. At first, her housemates claimed they had no idea where she went. Some said she left on her own. Others gave conflicting stories. Police noticed the inconsistencies immediately. Why couldn't her closest friends agree on her last movements? Why did their stories keep changing? It was as if they were hiding something. And behind closed doors, detectives started asking a darker question. Were these friends really covering for Phoebe, or covering for themselves? For weeks, police expanded the search radius. Drones scanned the skies, dogs tracked every scent. Volunteers searched forests, creeks, and abandoned areas. But still, no Phoebe. Her family clung to hope, believing maybe she was alive somewhere. But as the days dragged into weeks, officers began to prepare for the worst. And then, just as the case seemed to be going cold, police received a chilling tip, a location, out in a remote bushland area. What they were about to find there would shatter everything. Before we go deeper into this shocking twist, I want to pause for a moment. Many of you are watching these crime stories every day, but most haven't subscribed yet. If you're one of them, please hit the subscribe button and share this video. It helps us bring you more real cases like this one and ensures Phoebe's story reaches more people. Now, back to the case. Late June 2025, nearly a month after Phoebe Bishop vanished, investigators were led to a remote area of bushland outside Bundaberg. It was a desolate place, far from houses, far from traffic. There, hidden among the scrub, they made a devastating discovery: human remains. Although the body was badly decomposed, detectives feared the worst. They suspected it was Phoebe. The site was quickly sealed off. Forensic teams combed the area for evidence: shoes, clothing, fibers, anything that could tell the story of what happened in those final moments. And in the pit of their stomachs, investigators already knew. This was no accident. Days later, testing confirmed the community's deepest fear. The remains belonged to Phoebe Bishop. She hadn't run away. She hadn't simply disappeared. She had been killed, and her body dumped in the bush. The news shattered her family. Their desperate hope was gone. Their daughter would never be coming home. But police had one focus now: justice. Who had done this to Phoebe? And why? The answers, investigators believed, were closer than anyone wanted to admit. Almost immediately, detectives turned back to the people who had lived with Phoebe in that chaotic house. These were the last people to see her alive. These were the people who gave conflicting stories. And now, investigators noticed something chilling. Some of the roommates weren't just nervous, they were actively trying to avoid police. But why? Was it fear or guilt? Detectives pressed harder, re-interviewing the friends again and again. And with each round of questioning, the cracks in their stories grew wider. Then came the breakthrough investigators had been waiting for. One witness, someone who had once been close to the group, came forward, and what they revealed was horrifying. According to this witness, Phoebe's so-called friends hadn't just been lying, they had been involved. The claim was that Phoebe was killed after a violent confrontation inside the house. Afterwards, her body was transported and dumped in the bushland to cover it up. The witness even gave names, and suddenly, the investigation turned into a homicide case. On a cold winter morning in July 2025, Bundaberg police carried out a dramatic series of arrests. Several of Phoebe Bishop's own housemates, people she trusted, people she lived with, were taken into custody. Neighbors watched in shock as handcuffed suspects were led from the house. The once quiet street now flooded with police cars, flashing lights, and media cameras. For the community, it was a stunning betrayal. The very people who had pretended to grieve with the family were now accused of murder.
But this was only the beginning, because what came next, in court, would reveal just how dark and twisted this case really was. After the shocking arrests, police laid formal charges. Several of Phoebe Bishop's housemates now faced murder and interference with a corpse. The community was stunned. These weren't strangers or random criminals. These were young people, barely out of their teens. But prosecutors argued that together they had conspired to end Phoebe's life and then hide her body. Each suspect maintained their innocence, but investigators claimed they had evidence tying them directly to the crime, evidence that could not be ignored. In court documents, details began to emerge. Detectives alleged that Phoebe had been violently attacked inside the home. Forensic testing revealed traces of blood in the house, blood that matched Phoebe's DNA. Phone records painted an even darker picture. Messages exchanged between the housemates in the hours after Phoebe disappeared hinted at panic and a cover-up. The more investigators uncovered, the more it seemed the suspects had been weaving a web of lies from the very beginning. The town of Bundaberg was reeling. Parents who once thought of the neighborhood as safe now questioned everything. How could a group of young people, Phoebe's own friends, commit such a horrific act? Vigils were held, candles lit, and flowers placed outside Phoebe's former home. Her family stood silently among the mourners, broken but determined to see justice done. And behind the grief, one chilling thought haunted everyone. If not for a single witness stepping forward, this crime might have never been solved. As the case intensified, whispers spread that some of the suspects were beginning to turn on each other. In hushed tones, investigators revealed that certain members of the group had confessed, at least in part, admitting to being present during the killing, but blaming others for the violence. These partial confessions sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Who was telling the truth? Who was lying to save themselves? And how deep did the betrayal run? One thing was certain: Phoebe Bishop's death had torn apart not only her family, but an entire community. By late 2025, the legal battle was fully underway. Defense lawyers argued that the suspects were being unfairly targeted, that the police relied too heavily on circumstantial evidence. But prosecutors stood firm, insisting they had the DNA, the phone records, and the witness testimony to prove exactly what had happened. The case was set for a lengthy trial, one that promised to expose the darkest secrets of that chaotic house and the twisted decisions that ended an innocent girl's life. And for Phoebe's family, the fight for justice was far from over. When the trial opened, the courtroom was packed. Journalists filled every seat, families of both the victim and the accused sat on edge, and the nation watched closely. The prosecution wasted no time. They described Pheobe Bishop as a vibrant young woman full of dreams whose life had been stolen in an act of senseless cruelty. They laid out their case, blood evidence, phone data, and chilling witness testimony that placed the suspects at the center of the crime. The defense, however, painted a very different picture. They argued that Phoebe's death had been a tragic accident, not a premeditated murder. The jury was left to decide who was telling the truth. As witnesses took the stand, dark secrets about life inside that chaotic share house began to surface. There were stories of heavy drinking, violent arguments, and simmering rivalries. Some witnesses claimed Phoebe had been bullied in the days leading up to her death. Others suggested jealousy and betrayal played a role. Each revelation pulled the jury deeper into a tangled web of lies and half-truths. For Phoebe's family, it was agony, listening to strangers dissect her final moments, while the accused sat silently just feet away. The courtroom atmosphere grew tense, each day more explosive than the last. By now, the world knew Phoebe Bishop's name. Social media buzzed with theories, debates, and outrage. Everyone seemed to have an opinion. But only 12 jurors would decide the fate of the accused. After weeks of emotional testimony, the jury finally returned with their decision. Several of Phoebe's housemates were found guilty of murder and sentenced to long prison terms. Others received lesser charges, convicted of helping to cover up the crime. As the verdicts were read aloud, tears filled the courtroom. Phoebe's parents clutched each other, relief and sorrow washing over them at once. Justice had been served, but their daughter would never come home. In the months that followed, the case became a symbol of both tragedy and resilience. Phoebe Bishop's name was etched into the memory of an entire community. Her family began speaking out, calling for greater awareness about youth violence, toxic peer groups, and the dangers of silence. Though her life was cut short, Phoebe's story became a warning and a reminder of the fragility of trust. Why did those closest to her turn so cruel? Could her death have been prevented? In the end, the truth is as haunting as it is heartbreaking. Phoebe Bishop's light was stolen too soon, but her story will never be forgotten. The case of Phoebe Bishop is one that shook an entire community. A young life full of dreams, taken away in the most tragic way. Her story reminds us how fragile trust can be and how betrayal can come from those closest to us. Even though justice was served, nothing can ever fill the void left in her family's hearts. But by remembering Phoebe, we keep her spirit alive, and we ensure her story is never forgotten. If you found this case as haunting and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss more real crime stories, just like this. This is not just a story, it's a reminder that truth always finds a way to surface, even in the darkest of mysteries.